So I really appreciate you coming to the Wild Heart Athletic Podcast and sharing your time this evening to talk to us and share a little bit about yourself. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
My name is Lana Hill. I do a lot of paraclimbing as well as some other sports in my past. I'm a current student at the University of Missouri studying finance and economics. I'll be graduating this year.
Okay, so your main sport is climbing. So could you tell me how you got into that? And I'm really curious because I'm also like a little avid climber, so I feel like we can kind of connect and start to talk about that a little bit.
I started climbing my sophomore year of high school. A friend of mine was starting a climbing club and she needed people to join, so I got roped into it. Did that for a semester, absolutely loved it. But the closest climbing gym to me was a 40-minute drive, and I didn't have my license at that time. So I had to kind of put climbing on pause for a while. And I started climbing again about 3 years ago at Mizzou, my freshman year. I think around November is when I got back into climbing. I did a little bit of indoor climbing and then jumped into outdoor climbing as well.
I got you. So that's really awesome that you guys are starting a community. I know there's a lot of people that are doing that, especially as it seems like climbing gyms are starting to get popular now thanks to the Olympics. So what was it like your, first time climbing, and then was it the same when you got back into it?
I remember it being tough. It was a new experience for me. Not something I'd ever done before, aside from like the mini climbing walls you'll see at summer camps. I enjoyed it a lot, mainly because I was there climbing with friends. And I did a lot of auto belay climbing, a little bit of bouldering, but I wasn't a huge fan of that. And then when I got to college, I started doing more bouldering because the only gyms in my area are bouldering gyms.
I gotcha. So um, that's funny. You said you didn't like bouldering.
Yeah, I got stuck with
You're
it.
not a not a boulder bro. That's okay. Bouldering, it's okay. It's a good time. So now that you kind of are doing that for school, so what was like the transition from, you know, climbing at school and things like that to now getting into like the paraclimbing and going to World Cups?
So I haven't done any like World Cups yet. This past year was my first nationals that I was able to go to. Before that, it was just recreational climbing, and I did some climbing at work on my campus job. I work at a ropes course and climbing gym as well. Uh, it was an interesting experience because I didn't really know anyone. The only adaptive climbers I knew were ones I met this past October at the Adaptive Climbers Festival in Kentucky. And they were the ones encouraging me to sign up for nationals. So I got in touch with Para Cliffhangers and they agreed to let me go with their group.
Okay, that's really exciting. So I've been hearing a lot about the Adaptive Climbers Fest up in Kentucky because I'm 6 hours away. So what was your experience like going to there and meeting like all these climbers for the first time? And you said they were like very welcoming and opening. Could you kind of describe your experience?
Uh, Honestly, I was in awe when I first got there. Everyone was just super nice and excited. And it's the first time I'd ever met a climber with a disability other than myself. So it was a really neat experience to interact with so many different climbers from all over the world, mostly around the country, but there were a few climbers from Canada. I know one was from Spain, and it was just awesome getting to talk to them, know about them and their history with climbing and other sports they do.
I got you. What surprised you the most when you were there?
Ooh, I guess how many people were gonna show up. I figured adaptive climbing, it's got to be like 20 people. And the way I found out about ACF was through an Instagram ad online. I looked at the post a few months before registering and thought, this is what, $30 for a weekend of camping and climbing with food included and just a lot of like fun clinics. This has to be a scam. I'm going to sign up. And so that's when I signed up, went, and had an amazing time.
No, that's awesome that like it worked out so well. That's interesting. They did an Instagram ad that's how you found out about it. It just shows how like social media is growing. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a good time. I'm looking forward to returning again this year.
I got you. Sounds like everybody I've talked to so far is just like they just keep mentioning the going out there for the festival, and I'm like, all right, well, I can't wait to hear some after stories because I hear some of the climbers like to get wild. I don't know if you've heard any stories. I'm sure you had some of your own.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I don't have stories, but I've definitely heard about them from past years.
That's all right. So it looks like you got something to look forward to the next time and some more competitions. And so, since you competed at nationals, what was it like? The first time competing in a competition, especially for climbing.
I was really nervous competing. It's the second competition I've done. The first one being a very small bouldering competition back in high school. But between those like 3 to 4 years, I had never competed at all. So it was really overwhelming and kind of nerve wracking to be around so many strong climbers and being unsure as to whether or not I would get very far. But everyone was very welcoming and just excited. I was sitting there with like other competitors, and we were just swapping beta the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's what really makes the climbing community like stand out. And that's really what attracted me to it, and why I've stayed a part of it for so long. Is the community is so friendly, welcoming, and things like that. And like you said, you guys are competing, but you're also helping each other out. So I think that's what's really incredible about it. So going kind of forward, you've done your first competition. I know you're in school, but do you like train or do you kind of just climb for fun, recreational? And then, you mentioned you climb outside. So what's kind of like, do you have a training routine or is that something you're in the process of like maybe you're in the future you're thinking about as you get more and more prepared for these competitions?
I don't have a training routine right now. I'd like to start one. I'm hoping this year. It's been tough to balance it between my classwork um, and my work schedule. I'm constantly busy, so it's difficult to find time to go to the climbing gym. But I do try to go at least once or twice a week. With it being a bouldering gym, there is only so much training I can do there. I can't climb above a foot, otherwise, I risk injury. So I mostly do low traverses that I kind of set myself and just have fun around the gym. I'm hoping when I graduate, I'll have the ability to move somewhere else with more top rope abilities.
That's fair. Have you started looking somewhere else for after graduation to maybe head to for some climbing?
The internship I'm doing this summer is in Orlando, and there are a few gyms nearby that do have some autos and top roping sections.
I gotcha. Yeah, or I've heard Orlando gyms are really good. A lot of strong climbers come out of Florida.
Yeah, they seem nice so far. I've only had a chance to check out their bouldering gym down here, but I think next summer I'll check out the other two as well.
Yeah, that seems to be the popular go-to is like a lot of bouldering space and a couple of ropes. It's like really hard sometimes to find a really good rope gym, if and then if you do, it's like it's a blessing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you asked me about outdoor climbing as well. So I got back into climbing at school through my university's climbing club, and they have like unofficial group trips where everyone kind of gathers together and we'll go to Kentucky or Arkansas, Red Rock Canyon in Nevada, as well as a few other local places around Missouri and Illinois.
Okay, that's really interesting. I have not climbed in Arkansas. How was that?
It's good. It's a lot of fun. We go to Horseshoe Canyon Ranch, and then I've also been to Sam's Throne down there, and both are really nice climbing spots.
All right, I'll have to put that on the bucket list. So I've been up to Kentucky for the red, but that's really awesome. And never. So what was it like going out to Nevada and stuff?
It was exciting. That was my first ever outdoor climbing experience, and it was a 24-hour road trip to get there. So part of the fun was the road trip. The other part of the fun was the fact that we were there at beginning of January. So it was really cold. We were camping the whole time, but we'd spend our days hiking out to the crag and then doing some climbing. I hopped on a couple routes. It's when I was still starting out, so it was maybe a 5.7, 5.8 for a few of them. I mostly just sat around and watched other people and just had fun.
Yeah, I mean that's the main thing, right? Like we keep coming back to the community and just the enjoyment, especially being outdoors. So would you say you prefer maybe climbing outside versus inside, or are you kind of like I just like climbing in general?
I do prefer outdoors. I think it's more of a, I don't want to say challenge, but I guess a fun adventure where none of the holds can be reset unless they, of course, fall off the rock. Um, and they also feel really nice with real rock compared to the plastic holds.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think climbing outside is a little bit better because the view is one thing, depending on where you're climbing. But then, like you said, you're outside in nature, and like you can't reset the route or ask for like a tweak if you really need it. And then you're having to problem solve on the fly, right? Because it's everything's natural, and then you get that the skin works so it's just more compatible with the rock outside, which is nice. So, do you have any like plans or trips in the future you think as far as like where you want to go climb? Are there areas that you're like really dying to go and travel and see and climb?
Nothing that I have planned at the moment, other than ACF in Kentucky. I really want to go back to Red Rocks. I think it'd be kind of a full circle, seeing as how the first time or the only time I went there was my freshman year. I'd like to graduate going at least one more time.
I got you. So, did you do both bouldering and ropes when you guys went out there?
Yeah, we did a little bit of bouldering, but it was mostly ropes.
Okay, and that's since that's your favorite, I'm sure you were having a blast.
Yeah, I did enjoy it. Bouldering was okay. It was my first time doing outdoor bouldering, and I'm not a huge fan. I do prefer indoor bouldering.
Hey, that's fair. It's nice to have the big old foam mats instead of the half ones that you have to carry around on your back. I can totally understand. So, what do you think is like the most challenging part when you like try to compare climbing outside versus climbing inside?
With climbing outside, I'm forced to get more creative with the holds. I know, like, no matter whether if you're climbing indoors or outdoors, you're still stuck with whatever's set. But with outdoors, you typically have more options to explore. Um, like if there isn't a hold that's immediately within my reach, if I'm on a rope, sometimes I'll just swing over to the other side, check that one out, and kind of zigzag across the wall. But with indoor climbing, bouldering especially, I'm really stuck with whatever the route setters do. And for the most part, the route setters at my gym don't really set with paraclimbers in mind. They kind of started to, but it's still a bit of a work in progress. So it's more of a matter of where's the next foothold? Can I move more than 3 feet across this wall in a like low traverse? Or will I just need to kind of hop around from section to section?
Yeah, I kind of going back to like you said, it's the setters really aren't setting for like adaptive climbers, and I think that's gonna go ahead and assume that will probably change too, given the fact that the Paralympics have now accepted and are going to have climbing in 2028, which I think is really exciting. And then, are there like other kind of gyms near you that like have like adaptive communities in your area, or is there one close to you?
There is one in Columbia, which is where I go to school. And it's technically an all ages program, but for the most part, they really only cater to kids. Um, I was in that program and I was the oldest one. The second oldest after me was, I think, 10 or 11. So it's not a huge community. I've only met one other adaptive climber in the area besides me.
Okay. Yeah. It's unfortunate it's such a small world. So, and we were talking. You mentioned earlier like sports you played, when you're growing up. So, comparatively with the climbing, what other kind of sports do you play? And or is climbing kind of your main sport? You think you're going to stick with, or you still kind of engage in those other hobbies and previous sports you played?
And growing up, I started out doing just general like ice skating. I was in an ice skating club for I think 8 years. It was called Ice Skate. It was a kids like adaptive skating program. It was meant to be therapeutic. I, I did that from the time I was 8 until I was 14 or 15. I played tennis for a semester in middle school and then realized I did not like tennis at all. So I stopped. And in high school, I threw shot put and javelin for 3 years. But climbing's the only
Okay.
one that stuck.
Climbing's the only one that's stuck. Okay, that's fair. So it sounds like you got the climbing bug. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
So
that's
ice skating, yeah, ice skating. Okay, we got to definitely go down that path. How was So you said it was therapeutic, but what was it like being out on the ice and skating? Like what makes that sport very unique?
it was really calming for me. Um, I got the way the program was set up. It was a either a one-on-one counselor camper situation or like two-on-one, two counselors helping me out, teaching me how to skate. So I spent the first 1 to 2 years learning how to skate, and then after that, I gradually started to improve of how fast can I skate, can I do any tricks, which was not much. I could maybe glide on one foot for a few seconds and then start increasing that. I started to get into a little bit of figure skating my last year, but at that point, I just had too many commitments in high school. I couldn't keep up.
I got you. It's kind of that age old story where everybody's got a lot of commitments and playing all these sports. I can understand, and something had to go. So I guess it was ice skating, huh?
Unfortunately,
I got you. And then so you jumped into tennis, and you were just like not having it. So what was what was that experience like?
it was comical because I could never hit the ball. I'd take off sprinting across the court, trying to hit the ball again, would always miss. And then my partner would get it, and I'd end up sprinting all the way across the other side of the court. And it wasn't my sport. I'm not a runner.
All right, that's fair. That's fair enough, right? Yeah, especially the like back and forth with the sprints and stuff like that can be tough with tennis, and then the hand-eye coordination. But the comical. Well, that's a good way to explain it. And then so we went from tennis, and we're like, nah, I'm good. And then into shot put and javelin. So how did that go?
It was fun. I liked it a lot. I went to a pretty small high school, and we did not have many throwers. So it was me and two other people for the most part. We all kind of took turns doing. I think everyone did shot put, and then a few people broke into different sports. So I also did javelin, and it was cool just being able to learn how to throw a spear. And it may not have gone too far, and it did involve a little bit of running. There were a few times I completely wiped out in the mud, but the feeling of just throwing the javelin or the shot put was exciting.
So was there anything in particular that kind of drew you to that sport, or was it just like the coach was like, "Hey, we need people, we need throwers," and then just and you're just like, "All right, let's do this. Let's see what happens."
One of my best friends in high school ran track, and I thought it'd be fun to do. So I tried out and realized very quickly I do not want to run. But then one of the coaches pulled me aside and suggested I try throwing instead. And that's how I got into it. I threw a few times and realized I wanted to stick with it. I wanted to try and get fit through high school, and I figured track was a good way to go, but not the running part.
Not the running part. So we're just kind of like xing the running, huh?
Yes.
Oh no, that's all right. I don't think that's everybody's cup of tea, so you're fine. It's funny to see like all the memes and stuff on social media. People are like, cardio, no thanks. I'm sure you've seen a couple of those. So we got into throwing. So what was the training like when you were in high school for that sport? Because I've never like talked to, or like we didn't have throwers at my high school growing up, especially for the track. Like we had the shot put, but we didn't have the javelin. So I'm very curious, like what that was like, what the training was like, and practice.
So during the off season, it was a lot of strength and conditioning. So we'd go to the weight room and do practice throws or ghost throws where we're just going through the motions and not throwing a physical item. And I typically trained about an hour and a half to 2 hours every day after school. And then I had meets on weekends. Um, yeah, a lot of weights. We do weights at least twice a week. And then during our on season, we would actually go out to the field and start throwing. We didn't have a designated throwing field, so we went over to one of the nearby seminaries. They had a field behind it that was, I think, was meant for baseball, and we used that instead, and just threw the javelin across as far as we could without hitting the building.
That's fair. So how complicated is it like learning the steps to kind of go into like the javelin throw? Because I've seen the shot put, but like the javelin's kind of it's very interesting. I feel like it's very technique driven.
It is. I was not expecting that when I first started. I thought I'd just be standing at the line throwing, but it does require a lot to get into. Where at first you learn how to throw from standing right at that line, like the drawback, the release, and then after that you move into a three-step process where you're essentially just running and taking only 3 steps, but you have to cross your feet over one another before you throw. And trying to do that while throwing for someone who's not coordinated was definitely an interesting challenge. But after that step, I eventually learned how to run, transition into that 3 step, then the throw. And the final phase was learning how to run with what they have is a J heel, which is a spike that you strap on to your heel. And when you're running through tall grass, that's often uneven in some random high school in the middle of the Midwest, it can be a little tough to not fall into those molehills. So it took a bit of practice, but I figured it out.
I gotcha. What was your furthest throw, and like how is that comparatively to like normal?
Ooh, I don't remember. Um, my furthest throw, I think it was like 45 foot, which is
Okay.
pretty low compared to um, like non-disabled athletes. I think someone else on my team got 90 feet, maybe further. Um, that's pretty typical. Shot put, oh, it's been so long. I think my furthest might have been 11 or 12 feet. Nothing too crazy. I think the average, it gets up to like 20 plus. But for Missouri, they only had shot put as the official para throwing sport. They didn't have javelin at that time, so I only competed against other able-bodied athletes.
Oh, okay. And so this was like a high school league that you were competing with other para athletes and stuff.
Yeah, for shot put, it we only had one para event, and that was our state meet. And one year, I think I threw against myself because I was the only one in the state. And then another year, it was me and maybe two other people.
Okay, as it slowly gained like popularity, but like have other people started to kind of come out and enter that like the para shot put, especially kind of in the area you're from?
I think so. Um, I didn't get too involved with it after high school, but it seemed like they were starting to get a little bit more of a participation rate. Um, Missouri just doesn't have a lot in the way of athletics.
That's fair. That's understandable. um, did you have a favorite? Like, if you had to choose, like between shot put or the javelin, would you pick the javelin or the shot put, or other way around?
Javelin for sure.
Javelin. Okay, just because it's got that running start, right? Because you like to run.
Uh, no, I wiped out too many times for me to enjoy the running part of it. But I did like the throwing, and I could throw it a lot further than I could with the shot put.
I got you. So, what like skills or lessons have you taken from like your high school athletics into like your climbing endeavors now?
Just keep trying, keep pushing on. Even if you or take off running and you fall on your face, just keep going. So in terms of climbing, even if you fall off the wall, just try it again and keep going. Doesn't matter how many times you fall or if you never make it to the top, at least you're trying.
I got you. Do you think it's like a good thing to like kind of push your comfort zone and kind of push your limits a little bit?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I do. It whenever I find something that scares the absolute crap out of me, I try and make it my goal to do whatever that may be.
has there been like a recent time where you've had to kind of push out of your comfort zone?
This past summer, or I guess last summer, 23, my coworker and I were joking about going skydiving because there was a nearby skydiving place. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, he's crazy. Ain't no way I'm jumping out of a plane. But I caught myself because I realized, ah, I'm afraid of this. Now I have to do it. So I signed us both up. He bailed on me at the last minute, but I still went. I hopped out of that plane and just tried to overcome that fear. Would I do it again? I don't know about that one, but I at least did it.
No, yeah, that's good. Like you said, you just went on your own and did it when someone backed out. That's a really that's something that can be a hard thing to do too, especially when you're counting on someone to go with you. So, what was that experience like? Because I've heard really good things about skydiving. I've heard, yeah, there's some been mixed reviews that I've gotten, but I've heard overall like people really enjoyed it. Was that your experience, or I mean, I know you said you're like never again, but
It was really fun. I loved the adrenaline rush I felt from it. I didn't like the feeling of falling, but once the parachute caught, that was the good part because then you got a nice view of everywhere underneath.
how long did it feel like it took from the time you like left the plane for the parachute to open? Did it feel like forever, or
It felt like 5 seconds, but I think it was 50 seconds technically. It went by really quick.
yeah, that's quick, less than a minute. Oh wow.
Yeah, we jumped at 10,000 feet, and then we jumped. I jumped in Key West, so we like went over the water and then kind of had to steer our way back to land, which that was interesting. I thought we were going to crash into the water.
That's really cool that you got to have that experience and like especially over water, right? Nah, that's cool. Now, so did your like stomach drop when you like left the plane, or like what? How were you kind of like hyping yourself up to on like the plane ride out there?
I was terrified the whole week up until the jump, and then the morning of, I just felt eerily calm, where I couldn't think about anything. I had some kind of dumb song stuck in my head. I don't even remember what it was. but I couldn't think about anything else other than I'm in the plane. It's too late to turn back now. So I'm just going to go with it.
Kind of like I have no choice now. Here I am.
Yeah.
That's fair. So when you get into, because you're talking about like you had a song in your head, do you have like a ritual you would do for like competitions and like, or like any like little superstitions you have that you have to do before a competition or like if you're going to go throw or go climb?
Not that I could think of. Closest thing back in high school before I would throw, since I'd get so nervous, the only way to calm myself down was to just walk a whole bunch until I eventually threw. So I'd walk like half a mile, just laps around the track or around the field. But there's nothing I do with climbing, at least not yet.
Not yet. So you think like once you're kind of getting ready and training for like, future competitions, that's something you might develop or you think it's something that just might come over time?
I think it is something I'll develop. I want to at least try and get a warm up routine going. Right now, I just kind of warm up by jumping on the wall, and it's probably not the best option. So that kind of goes along with just trying to build a training plan too.
Yeah, that sometimes that can be hard building a training plan because like climbing, it's you got to have both on the wall training days and you have off the wall, and you've already got experience with strength and conditioning, which will definitely help you. Has anybody from like the adaptive community kind of given you any advice or like, hey, this is my trainer, you can reach out to them?
And during nationals, I spoke with I think Caroline and Emily a few times, and they were kind of walking me through what they typically do, as well as Melissa. She was also teaching me what she does for her warm up routine. Um, I don't remember much of it off the top of my head, just since it was only from those few limited interactions. I'm hoping to try and come up with something this year. I might just watch a bunch of YouTube videos and try and figure out what I can make work for my body.
I got you. There's a really good Instagram page. It's Tyler Nielsen's a really good guy. He's out in Utah. He's doing some really interesting things. It's like Camp for Human Performance. Really check him out. He's got a lot of good stuff. I went to a coaching course that he has because he's really into like granted he does a lot of stuff for the youth athletics but like he still works with professional climbers and stuff, so that's a great resource to look into. And then I was talking to Isabella the other day. I think she has a trainer that's really good, and Morgan Loomis, if you've met her yet, she's a good resource to have.
Awesome. Yeah, I've met or heard of a few of those, so I'll definitely look into them more or reach out. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm all about it, so that's good. And like I said, you have those resources, which is really nice. So, since you're just getting into it, which is really amazing, I'm kind of excited to see your development as you go through.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think once I graduate, I'll have at least a little more time on my hands to try and climb. I got one more year of school, and then I can focus a bit more on training. And at that point, I'll actually be able to take more days off of whatever job I'm working so that I can compete.
Yeah, that time will kind of help too. And like you said, studies are like a priority, which I understand because I'm in your shoes too, so I get it. So, what are you studying as far as like your degree or getting your education in?
Finance and economics. It's a dual degree program um, through the Mizzou Business School and Arts and Science School.
Okay. Is there like any particular area you like really want to like work for or do with that degree?
I'd like to eventually go into contracting. Um, I'd love it if I could work on something for the National Park Service. Right now, I'm in an internship program that's contracting for the Interior Business Center. within Department of Interior. So I have the potential to work on some like land management contracts, but it kind of depends. Right now, I'm in the learning process of everything, so I haven't had a chance to work on actual contracts.
Okay, and so when you say contracts, right? Could you kind of expand upon that a little bit?
So I'll essentially be learning how to write the contracts and kind of market them to outside companies so that the government can purchase uh, goods or services, whatever is required for upcoming projects. Kind of like a buyer, except I'm not the one buying things. I'm the one writing the contracts for people who buy the things.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really cool. I've never heard of anything like that. So you work with kind of like, is it like the buyer and seller, and then you write the contract? And like you said, it's for the government that gets that contract, right? So that they can help support what the land management or people like the seller needs. Did I
Yeah,
explain that right?
that's the closest one. The only difference is that there's a lot of steps leading up to it. So it's not just writing a contract, it's doing a whole bunch of other forms. A lot of red tape to go through.
Oh, okay. So how does that work with like the Parks and Recs or like the National Forest Service? Like, do you guys get to work with them and stuff like that?
The agency I work with does, um, it's one that works with pretty much any federal agency, but because they're within Department of Interior, a majority of the ones they work with are Fish and Wildlife, National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, as well as a few other agencies. And then they could have like some contracts for IT services or construction or whatever other departments may need.
I gotcha. That's got a lot of departments in one little department. That's the typical government.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know to a lot of people it seemed boring, but it's something that my dad does. So he's the one who got me into it.
I gotcha. So, what like interests you about it?
The aspect of being able to potentially work for like national parks or any kind of environmental agency to help them achieve their mission. Going to a business school, I was taught that pretty much all the jobs I'd be looking for were focused on gaining as much profit as possible. And to me, that's not really a motivator, but the ability to do some kind of beneficial work for the environment or an outdoor agency that I support is a motivator.
Okay, so like, what is like one way that you could help support like the National Park Service? I'm really curious because this is really interesting.
Uh, One of the contracts that other contractors above me have written and that I've heard about a lot is aviation services. So if someone is hiking in a park and they get injured, then they can write a contract to like send first responders out there. Or if there's a wildfire that comes on, then they have contracts written that will send fire support to put out the fire or to start controlled burns.
Okay, and so within the contracts, is that like the organization or the people that are going to be the ones that are going out there to like help with the forest fires, and then like this is who's going to be flying the plane, like the what do you call it, the rescue teams and stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because it is constantly changing what you're working on. So again, I'm still new. I haven't had a chance to actually write anything yet, but I've heard a bunch of stories from others within the agency and what they're doing.
I gotcha. So how does that kind of compare with like what your internship is right now?
So right now, I'm learning all the steps in that contract and like acquisition writing process. So we just finished going through the planning phase, which is a lot of market research, a lot of um, beginner forms that need to be filled out. And then we're slowly going through the rest of the phases, as well as all of the subforms that are required, what they mean, um, how to fill them out, like what their purpose is, why you should use this type of contract versus this type of contract, and so on.
I gotcha. That's really cool that you're learning that, right? Because you're talking about all that red tape. So it sounds like you're learning how to like maybe expedite that process. So like when you go and work, or hopefully in the future you get to go work for like the National Park Service, or you find something that you want to work for, you can fast track those contracts. So that's like amazing work that you get to do, right? Because again, you can talk about all the red tape with the federal government. I mean, that could be a whole conversation within itself if you really want to talk about it.
Yeah. But it's been a good time. I do enjoy it a lot. It's kind of like going to an extra class right now, but I do enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to hopefully returning again next summer to keep learning more.
Okay, so right now it sounds like you're in Florida for the internship, and then you'll go back to school and finish out.
Yeah.
Correct? Or okay, that's really awesome. That's interesting. I'm like digesting that. Like there is like that job exists. That's really cool that it like works for the contracts. So
Yeah, it's a very niche interest.
yeah, it's really different. Like I've never heard of anything, and so it's like really cool to like hear that. And then it's awesome to see that like how you fit in to the aspect of like for the rescue services or like the fire safety services. The people that are helping with like forest fires. Like that's really unique.
Yeah, I'm hoping I get to that point. It depends on where I'm placed afterwards. If I get stuck with something like IT or construction or like environmental, really up to fate.
That's fair. That's fair. It's all right. Sometimes we got to earn our stripes. It's okay. We've all been there, so I feel for you. But it'll be good, and it sounds like it's something you like, which really helps. And then, so kind of like going in, have there been any other classes that have like really just like blown your mind or that have surprised you? You're like, oh, this is really interesting.
I took a financial management class this past fall, and it was my hardest class. And I thought it was one of the most interesting courses I took because the entire course was taught on Excel. Um, we did all of our assignments, all of our learning through various Excel workbooks that my professor created. So it took a while to get used to how to go through everything in Excel. So I used a bunch of different formulas. And then I eventually got the hang of it. And now I'm a wizard with Excel. So it was very useful.
I gotcha. Is it difficult to learn Excel? Like, are there like some really cool tricks that you like never knew, and then you went to this class and you're like, wow, that makes life a whole lot easier.
Most of it I did know ahead of time. I just never had the comfortability with it. But after using it so much, it's very easy to know exactly what I'm looking for, what functions I need to use. I remember I took an Excel course before this. It was one of the required ones. And we were learning so many things for that class. It all got very muddled. We eventually learned how to do like some basic programming. And that's where they lost me. I couldn't figure out what to do.
Yeah, programming's hard from what I've heard to learn, even like the basic level. I'm lost. So I feel you. That's really cool. I've seen some like interesting things with like people that work in like finances with like spreadsheets, and it's just crazy the like templates they can build and things like that. And like you said, they're just like an Excel wizard.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of practice and exposure. But once you got that, you're set.
So given like all the like financial classes I'm sure you take it, like are you kind of like a financial guru now, or is it just kind of only pertaining to like the contracts and stuff that you're working with?
Um, I'm okay with finance stuff. This past year, I only just started to get into the major courses. Before then, it was mostly the required ones, either the general education ones, the electives, a few other like beginner level business classes. This upcoming semester, I think the majority of my classes are either finance or economics. So that's when I'll really be getting into it. But I'm only learning corporate finance, nothing on the personal finance side.
Okay, so those are definitely two separate entities. Okay, that's good to know. That's awesome. You're ahead of the game, it sounds like. So moving kind of forward, especially with like, rock climbing and stuff like that. I know you're a student, but do you have any like personal goals when it comes to like whether it be next year or you kind of just like, well, I'm gonna get through school and then I'll think about it.
This year, my main focus is just trying to graduate. I'd love to get into training more for climbing, but it's really going to be dependent on classes and my work schedule. Um, I'd really like to go back to nationals and try and compete. And thinking years out to the future, I'd like to, at some point, attempt like world competition. It's just a matter of working my way up to that and finding a way to dedicate a structured amount of time to climbing.
I gotcha. Well, Lana, I appreciate your coming on and talking to our audience and telling us about yourself. And I'm really excited to kind of see where you go, especially in your future journey. And hopefully, I'll get to see you out there and watch you go win some worlds and get some medals. I'm looking forward to seeing that because I know you'll crush it. Again, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your evening with us.
Thank you.